Marcus Reed had never been the kind of man who drew attention. At 22, he worked double shifts at a tire factory in Cleveland. Saving for mechanic school, he spent most nights tinkering with old engines behind his uncle's house, the radio humming low, the smell of grease on his hands. He wasn't famous, rich, or reckless, but in the wrong hour in the wrong neighborhood, that didn't matter. It began on a gray October evening in 2008. The sky was low and heavy with rain. Marcus had just left work, his jacket zipped high against the wind, when two police cruisers swerved across the street in front of him. Officers jumped out, shouting his name, though he had never seen them before. They said a convenience store clerk had been shot 15 minutes earlier. The suspect was a tall, black man in a dark hoodie who fled toward the factory district. Marcus fit the description, they said. He didn't run. He froze, palms raised, confusion twisting in his chest. They searched him, found nothing but a time-stamped punch card and his phone. Still, they cuffed him. At the precinct, the questions came fast. Where were you at 6:45? Did anyone see you? Why did you toss the gun? He tried to explain. He had clocked out at 6:50, stopped for gas, called his mother at 7:03. She still had the call record. The detectives barely listened. They already had a witness, a frightened teenager who had glimpsed the shooter under the streetlight. The boy hesitated when shown the lineup, but his eyes lingered on Marcus. The officer nodded slightly, and that was enough. The witness said yes. Marcus Reed, number 3, was the man he saw. Within a week, the local news had his mugshot plastered beside the headline, "Factory worker arrested in corner store murder." Neighbors avoided his family. His mother stopped answering the phone. The factory put him on indefinite leave. Public defenders came and went, each carrying stacks of cases and little time. They advised him to take a plea deal, 15 years instead of life. "If you fight and lose, you'll never get out," one lawyer warned. Marcus refused. He hadn't killed anyone. The trial began the following spring. The courtroom smelled of polish and old paper. The prosecutor painted him as a desperate man angry about money, citing a minor parking fine as motive. The defense called 2 co-workers who swore he was still at the factory when the shots were fired, but the jury seemed unmoved. The teenager took the stand, nervous but certain, pointing again to Marcus. The police had recovered no weapon, no fingerprints, no DNA, only that fleeting identification and a dark hoodie folded in an evidence bag. In 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty of second-degree murder. 10 years to life. The first night in prison hollowed him out. The clang of doors, the smell of bleach and sweat, the endless echo of men shouting through metal. Marcus learned to keep quiet, to read faces fast, to trade respect like currency. He took a job in the laundry, sending half his tiny paycheck home when he could. Every month he wrote letters to lawyers, Innocence projects, journalists, anyone who might listen. Most came back unopened. His mother visited once a year, thinner each time, holding his hand through glass. He kept a small notebook hidden beneath his mattress. In it he recorded every detail of that night, the time he left work, the gas receipt, the phone call, the street cameras he thought might have captured his route. He wrote not just to remember, but to stay sane. "If I forget," he once told a cellmate, "then they win twice." Years passed in routine. He studied law in the prison library, memorized cases of wrongful conviction, learned how bias and fear could twist truth into confession. One winter evening, after 8 years inside, he read about a new DNA testing program funded by the state. They were re-examining old evidence in violent crimes. Marcus filled out the form in block letters, explaining that no DNA had been tested at his trial. The sample from the clerk's shirt might still exist. Months went by. Then, one spring morning, the warden called his name over the intercom. He was wanted in the counselor's office. 2 investigators waited, strangers in suits. They told him the DNA on the victim's shirt matched another. Man, a repeat offender arrested in a neighboring county for an armed robbery. The man had confessed to that crime and several others in the same area. Marcus's conviction, they said, was under review. He felt the words but didn't believe them until 6 months later the judge signed the order vacating his sentence. After 10 years, 3 months and 5 days, Marcus Reed walked out of prison with a plastic bag of belongings and no apology. Freedom was quieter than he imagined. The world had moved on without him. The tire factory was gone, his mother's house foreclosed, his friends scattered. He stayed at a halfway home, waking up at dawn because silence still frightened him. The compensation claim crawled through bureaucracy. The state would fight to pay as little as possible. Interviews brought pity, but not jobs. He volunteered at a community center, teaching kids how to repair bicycles, warning them about how fragile truth could be. Reporters came once, asking if he hated the police. He said he didn't. Hate is another kind of prison, he told them. It locks you where they left you. What he wanted was acknowledgement, someone to say the system had failed, that his lost years mattered. But the state offered only paperwork and a check that arrived 2 years later, unsigned because a new clerk hadn't yet been authorized. He laughed when he saw it. 10 years for nothing, and still more waiting. At night he sometimes walked by the courthouse steps, where his trial had taken place. He'd sit there with coffee, watching people pass under the yellow lamps. The teenager who misidentified him had moved away, the papers said. The detective had retired. The prosecutor was running for judge. None of them would ever know what those 10 years had cost. His mother's funeral he couldn't attend, the niece he never met, the man he might have become. Yet he refused to let bitterness own him. He started recording short talks, online faceless clips about bias, mistaken identity, and the power of forgiveness. People listened. Some wrote that they'd never thought about how easy it was for innocence to disappear behind bars. Marcus never sought revenge. He wanted reform, better lineups, mandatory video interrogations, accountability for misconduct. He spoke in schools, showing his prison ID to remind students that justice was fragile, that truth could be silenced by assumption. Each time he finished, he quoted the line he'd written in his notebook years earlier. If I forget, they win twice. On the 10th anniversary of his release, Marcus stood outside the same corner store that had changed his life. It was boarded up now, the sign faded, the memories buried under dust. He laid a small flower on the step for the clerk who died that night, a man he'd never met, but whose tragedy had chained him. He whispered a prayer for both their souls. The wind carried it away. Marcus Reed was not a hero, not a saint, not even a headline anymore. He was simply proof that injustice doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers through paperwork, through glances, through the quiet nod of a jury that doesn't see you. And yet, in his calm voice and steady eyes, there lived a stubborn kind of hope. He had been broken and remade by the same system that once erased him. Now, every time he told his story, he turned his pain into evidence that freedom must mean more than open gates. It must mean truth, fairness, and the courage to admit when we were wrong.